I am Leila, 32 years old, and the night my family crossed a line they could never uncross started with a parking lot and a question my grandmother should never have had to ask. She was standing under the amber glow of the entrance lights outside Hargrove's, the kind of steakhouse in Houston's River Oaks neighborhood where the waitstaff remembers your name and the menu has no prices on the women's side. Grandma Ruth was 81 years old, wrapped in a cream wool coat with a single strand of pearls at her throat, and she was scanning the valet circle with a look of quiet, focused confusion that made my stomach drop before I had even crossed the parking lot on foot. She spotted me. Her face lit up for exactly 2 seconds. Then her eyes moved past my shoulder to the empty lane behind me, and the warmth slowly drained away. "Baby girl," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like Chanel No. 5 and something safe I had been chasing my whole life. She held me at arm's length. "Why did you valet park a rideshare?" I opened my mouth. I had been rehearsing some version of an answer the entire 15-minute ride over, but before I could form a single word, the glass doors behind her swung open and my mother stepped out. Diane moved the way she always moved in public, like the whole world was a red carpet installed specifically for her arrival. She was wearing a sapphire wrap dress that I recognized as Chloe's birthday gift from last spring, and she had the particular smile on her face that I had learned to fear more than her anger. It was her management smile. Calm. Surgical. Already ahead of whatever you were about to say. "Mother Ruth, don't fuss," Diane said, looping her arm through my grandmother's and steering her gently toward the doors. "The Lexus was just sitting in Leila's parking garage collecting dust. Kevin needs reliable transportation for his interviews, and Leila takes the train to work anyway." She glanced at me over her shoulder with the expression of someone explaining basic arithmetic to a slow child. She practically insisted. I had not insisted. I had not been asked. I had woken up that morning to an empty space in my building's secure garage and a one-line text from my mother. "Gave Kevin the car. You're fine." Grandma Ruth stopped walking. She turned her head slowly and looked at my mother with an expression I had seen exactly once before in my life, when a contractor tried to overcharge her by $40,000 on a renovation and she caught him doing it. "The Lexus," Grandma Ruth said, very quietly. "The SUV. Yes," Diane said, keeping her voice bright. "The one you gave Leila for her birthday last year. Kevin's been borrowing Chloe's sedan, and with the baby coming, they really need—" "That vehicle," Grandma Ruth said, each word precise and separate, "was a birthday gift I purchased for Leila, in her name. With her insurance, with her registration." Diane's smile held, but something behind her eyes flickered. "And Leila is family. Kevin is family. What belongs to one of us?" "Kevin is my daughter's boyfriend of 14 months, I said. I had not planned to say it out loud. It came out anyway. "He has had 2 job interviews in 6 months. He is not my family. And nobody asked me." Diane turned her full attention to me for the first time. The management smile was completely gone. "We will talk about your attitude later," she said softly. "Tonight is your father's retirement dinner. You will go inside, you will sit down, and you will be grateful that this family still makes a place for you at the table. I need you to understand something, friends. I am a registered nurse. I have worked nights, doubles, and holidays at the same hospital in the Texas Medical Center for 9 years. I pay my own rent, my own insurance, and every single bill that comes to my name. I have never once asked my parents for money. And for most of my adult life, I have accepted being treated as the family's spare tire useful in emergencies, ignored the rest of the time because I genuinely believed that if I just stayed quiet and kept my head down, they would eventually see me clearly. That belief died in a parking lot in River Oaks on a Tuesday night in October. I went inside. I sat down. But I did not do it because my mother told me to. I did it because Grandma Ruth had not let go of my hand since we walked through the doors, and she was squeezing my fingers with the quiet, firm pressure of a woman who was communicating something she did not yet want to say out loud. The private dining room at Hargrove's had 12 people in it. My father, Gerald, was at the head of the table, newly retired from 30 years as a civil engineer, looking like a man who had already forgotten every grievance from every year of his career. Beside him sat my mother, arranging her silverware. Beside her sat Chloe, my younger sister, 28, glowing and effortlessly beautiful in a way that had always made my parents look at her like she was proof that they had done something right. And beside Chloe sat Kevin. Kevin James Aldridge was 29 years old and had the energy of a man perpetually on the verge of his big break. He wore a blazer I was almost certain my father had taken him to buy, and he was already working the table, leaning in, laughing a little too loudly, making eye contact with my father's former colleagues in the precise way of someone practicing for a life he had not yet earned. When he saw me sit down, he reached into the pocket of that blazer, pulled out a set of keys, and set them in the center of the table with the casual confidence of a man who considered the gesture a formality. "Keys are in good shape," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Little scratch on the rear bumper, but I'll have that buffed out." The table continued its various conversations. No one paused. No one acknowledged what had just happened. My father nodded vaguely in my direction, as if Kevin had just returned a borrowed pen. I stared at the keys. My keys. The keys to a car that had been in my name for 11 months, that I had driven to work 45 times, that I had packed with overnight bags for 2 solo road trips I took specifically because I needed to remember what it felt like to belong to myself. Grandma Ruth was watching Kevin with an expression of absolute stillness. "Kevin," she said pleasantly, "how long have you had the vehicle?" Kevin looked surprised to be addressed directly. He straightened. "Since Saturday, Miss Ruth." "Just 4 days. Grandma Ruth picked up her water glass. "And your driver's license is current? Your insurance policy lists you as a primary driver?" Kevin glanced at Chloe. Chloe looked at my mother. My mother looked at the centerpiece. The silence that traveled around that triangle in under 3 seconds told me everything I needed to know about how thoroughly this had been planned without me. "I'm still getting the paperwork sorted," Kevin said carefully. "So you have been operating my granddaughter's vehicle for 4 days without insurance," Grandma Ruth said. "Not a question." She set her water glass down with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. My mother jumped in. "Mother Ruth, the policy is being updated this week." "Diane." Grandma Ruth did not raise her voice. She never raises her voice. She simply stopped looking at Kevin and looked at my mother, and the quality of her attention was enough to silence the entire end of the table. "I will speak with you at the end of dinner." Those 7 words did more damage than a screaming match ever could have. I watched my mother's composure develop a hairline fracture so small, only someone who had studied that face for 32 years could have spotted it. My father cleared his throat. "Let's order, everyone." I made it through the appetizers. I made it through the salad. I was most of the way through the main course when Chloe reached across the table and covered my hand with hers in that sisterly way she always deployed when she wanted something. "I know this is a weird situation," she said, low enough that only I could hear. "But Kevin is trying, Leila. He's really, genuinely trying. And I'm 12 weeks along now, and I need him mobile. I need him to feel like he's contributing." "Chloe," I said, "I needed to get to work. You said you take the train. I take the train because Mom told everyone I take the train. I drive to work 3 times a week for night shifts because the train doesn't run at 2 in the morning, and rideshares cost me $40 round trip." Chloe blinked. Something moved across her face that might have been guilt if she'd had more practice with it. "Mom said you offered." I woke up to an empty parking spot. The hand over mine withdrew. She leaned back, and then she did the thing she had been doing since we were children, the thing that had always worked, the thing that made my parents rush to her side like she had activated an alarm. She teared up. "I can't deal with this kind of stress right now," she whispered, pressing her fingertips to her collarbone. "The doctor said my blood pressure is already—" "Chloe." My mother was already half risen from her chair. "I'm fine," Chloe said in the tone of voice that meant she was communicating the opposite. "I'm fine. Leila, can you just let this one thing go? For the baby? For our family?" I looked at my sister. I thought about every single time that sentence, in some version or another, had been the reason I surrendered something. The summer I gave up my internship stipend because Chloe needed help with her apartment deposit. The Christmas I slept on a cot in the laundry room so Kevin could have the guest bedroom. The birthday money from Grandma Ruth the year I turned 25, redirected to Chloe's salon school tuition because she was going through a hard time and I was, quote, the strong one. No, I said. The table went quiet. My father set down his fork. My mother stood up fully. Kevin stared at a spot above my left ear, and Grandma Ruth, beside me, folded her hands in her lap and went absolutely, intentionally still. Excuse me? My mother said. I said no. I was surprised by how steady my voice was. I'm not letting this go. That car is in my name. Taking it without asking me was theft. And if it was damaged or involved in an accident while Kevin was uninsured and driving it, the liability falls on me. I could lose my license. I could be sued. That's not a weird situation, Mom. That's a serious problem. My father looked at my mother. My mother looked at me with the expression of someone recalibrating after an unexpected variable. You're being dramatic, she said. And selfish. Your sister is pregnant. Your father just retired. Tonight is a celebration, and you are making it about yourself. The car is a piece of property, my father said. His voice was not unkind, which was almost worse. Property is less important than family, Leila. We raised you to know that. I looked at him. I had idolized this man for 32 years. I had memorized his laugh lines and the way he took his coffee and every piece of advice he had ever given me about working hard and standing tall and being someone your people can count on. And he was sitting there telling me that what had been taken from me without my knowledge or consent was less important than the feelings of the man who had taken it. Gerald, Grandma Ruth spoke for the first time in several minutes. You raised both of your daughters in this family. I need you to sit with that for a moment. My father opened his mouth, closed it. Grandma Ruth reached into her handbag. She did not pull out a phone. She did not make a dramatic call. She simply placed a small white business card face down on the table beside her dessert fork and rested 2 fingers on top of it. I'll be calling Franklin first thing tomorrow morning, she said, addressing no one and everyone. Franklin was her estate attorney, had been for 22 years. Every person at that table knew exactly what that name meant. Dinner ended 40 minutes later. Nobody ordered dessert. I did not sleep well that night. I lay in my apartment listening to the city and running through the same loop I had been running my entire adult life. The loop that always ended with me finding a reason to forgive, a way to minimize, a justification for staying quiet to keep the peace. I was very good at that loop. I had been running it since I was 11 years old and figured out that making myself smaller made the household calmer. What I did not know, lying there in the dark, was that while I was making myself smaller, a completely different story had been developing around me for years. A story I was the main character of, without ever having been told I was in it. I found out at 9:47 the following morning when Grandma Ruth called me. Come to the house, she said, and bring your last 3 tax returns if you have them handy. I drove to her home in Sugarland in a rideshare, which cost me $31. Her house was a pale yellow craftsman behind a row of old live oaks, and she met me at the door before I reached the porch. Rosa, her housekeeper who had been with her for 16 years, brought us tea without being asked and quietly disappeared. Grandma Ruth sat across from me at the kitchen table. She did not have the small, gentle energy of an 81-year-old woman telling her granddaughter a comforting story. She had the energy of a woman who had been waiting a long time to say something difficult and had finally decided the time had come. Your grandfather left instructions, she said. When he passed, he left a letter with Franklin, private, addressed to me. I have been sitting with the decision in that letter for 4 years, because I needed to be sure. She slid a manila folder across the table. Sure of what? I asked. Sure that you were the one. Inside the folder was a document I had to read 3 times before it fully registered. My grandfather, James Aubrey Whitfield, who had died 4 years ago at 83, had built a modest commercial real estate portfolio over 40 years. 3 strip malls, a small office park, and a medical building in the medical center that he had held through 2 recessions without ever selling. He had always described himself as a simple man with patient money. I had always believed him. The whole family had. What the family did not know what my grandmother had been sitting on for 4 years was that the portfolio had appreciated to a total value of just under $7 million. And per the amendment my grandfather had added to his estate plan 14 months before he died, it had been placed into a revocable living trust with one beneficiary. My name. Grandpa left it to me, I said. I heard my own voice like it was coming from a room down the hall. He left it to you, Grandma Ruth confirmed. Not to Chloe, not to Gerald, not to Diane. He told me in the letter that he watched how your parents managed money, and he watched how you managed yours, and he made his decision. He said he wanted his work to outlast his mistakes. I stared at the document. They don't know? Franklin's office has a standing instruction not to disclose unless you claim it, or unless I authorize disclosure. She wrapped both hands around her tea mug. I have been watching your family, baby. I watched your mother take your college savings for Chloe's apartment. I watched your father let it happen. I watched you keep showing up, keep working, keep giving, and never once ask for what you were owed. Her voice stayed even, but her eyes had the shine of someone carrying something heavy for a long time. I needed to know that the money wouldn't change you into something you shouldn't be. It hasn't. I could not speak for a solid minute. There's something else, she said, and the weight in her voice shifted into something sharper. She opened the folder to the second document. It was a bank statement, not mine, not hers. My father's personal savings account, printed and highlighted in 2 places. Franklin's office does an annual review of family financial activity as part of estate management, she said carefully. 3 months ago, his paralegal flagged something. Your father has been making regular withdrawals from his personal account and depositing them into a joint checking account he shares with Kevin. I looked at the highlighted lines. 11 deposits over 8 months. Each one between $2,000 and $4,000. Together, they totaled just over $27,000. He's been funding Kevin, I said. He's been funding Kevin's lifestyle, his wardrobe, his lunches, and based on what Franklin's investigator found a significant portion of Kevin's gambling debts. She paused. Your mother knows. She has been telling your sister it is an interest-free family loan. She has been telling your father it is an investment in his future son-in-law. She has not been telling anyone that Kevin applied for a personal loan last month using your name as a cosigner reference, with documentation your mother helped him prepare. The kitchen was very quiet. He forged a reference letter, I said. He submitted documentation implying you had verbally co-signed. The application was flagged by the lender because your financial profile was strong enough to raise questions about why you hadn't signed directly. They called the number on the application. She looked at me steadily. That number was your mother's cell phone. I sat back in my chair. The $7 million inheritance was still open in front of me. The fraudulent loan application was beside it. And somewhere across Houston, my mother was going about her Tuesday morning, believing she had managed this situation into a shape she could control. She had been managing me my entire life. She had just been doing it, I now understood, while standing on top of a trapdoor. I asked Grandma Ruth for 2 things before I left. I asked her to call Franklin and initiate the trust transfer into an active account in my name, and I asked her to keep everything quiet for exactly 3 more weeks, until my family's next scheduled gathering, my parents' 35th anniversary dinner, already booked at a private event room at the River Oaks Country Club. She studied my face for a long moment. You want to do it in front of people, she said. I want Chloe to understand what she's been a part of, I said. And I want my parents to understand it in a room they can't walk out of without everybody seeing them go. Grandma Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Don't be cruel for the sake of it, baby. Be thorough. Yes, ma'am, I said. The 3 weeks that followed were the calmest of my life. I went to work. I picked up an extra shift. I met with Franklin and his team for 3 hours on a Thursday afternoon and left their office as the legal owner of a $7 million commercial portfolio I had not known existed 72 hours earlier. I called a property management firm and had the accounts reviewed. I opened a new personal banking relationship. I did not tell a single person. My mother called me twice during those 3 weeks. Once to ask if I was bringing anything to the anniversary dinner. once to mention, brightly, that Kevin had started a new side business and that it would mean a lot to the family if I would consider sharing it on my hospital's internal employee network. I said I would think about it. I did not think about it. Chloe texted me a photo of her ultrasound at 14 weeks. I sent back a heart emoji. I meant it. The baby had done nothing wrong. The night of the anniversary dinner, I got dressed slowly. I wore a burgundy wrap dress I had bought for myself 6 months earlier and never had occasion to wear. I clasped the small gold necklace my grandfather had given me the year I graduated nursing school, a thin chain with a single polished piece of amber because it seemed right. I arrived at the country club on time. The private event room was warm and golden, 40 or so guests from my parents' lives arranged around circular tables. My father's college roommates, my mother's sorority sisters, their neighbors from 3 houses back, the ones they had always been mildly competitive with. I was placed, I noticed immediately, at a table near the back corner, close to the service door, beside my father's cousin who nobody had spoken to in 6 years. I sat down. I smiled at my father's cousin. I ordered a sparkling water. Kevin was at the head table. He was wearing a new suit. He was laughing with my father's former colleagues. He had his arm around Chloe's shoulders with the proprietary ease of a man who had already decided this was his territory and was simply waiting for the paperwork to catch up. And at one point during the cocktail hour, I watched him hand my father a glossy printed folder with the logo of something called Aldridge Capital Solutions on the cover. And I watched my father nod slowly, with the look of a man being shown a very reasonable proposition. My mother materialized beside me sometime after the salads arrived. "You look nice," she said, in the tone of someone describing furniture. "Thank you. I need to ask you something," she said, sitting down and lowering her voice. "Kevin is making a presentation tonight. Very brief, right after dessert. He's looking for initial investors for his new venture. $15,000 minimum buy-in. Your father and I are leading the round." She paused. "It would send a beautiful message to the family if you participated. You're a professional. You have savings. It would show everyone that we're united." I looked at her. "What does Aldridge Capital Solutions do, Mom?" "It's a financial consulting firm. Kevin has a bachelor's degree in communications and has never worked in finance. He's pivoting. That's what entrepreneurs do." She smoothed her napkin in her lap. $15,000 is not a large amount for someone at your income level. "I'll think about it," I said. She patted my hand and went back to the head table. I took out my phone under the table and sent a short text to a number I had added to my contacts 2 weeks earlier. The number belonged to a woman named Sandra Okafor, who was a fraud investigator with the Texas State Securities Board. I had contacted her office 10 days prior, when Franklin's investigators had confirmed that Kevin's financial consulting firm had no registration, no licensed advisors, and was currently soliciting investments from at least 6 individuals in the Houston area using documentation that misrepresented its legal structure. My text said, "He's presenting tonight. Dinner room, River Oaks CC. Maybe 90 minutes. Her reply came in under 2 minutes. "We're outside." Kevin's presentation was polished in the way that PowerPoint templates and YouTube tutorials about sales confidence can make someone appear polished. He talked about disruption and generational wealth, and the unique opportunity facing Black families to build financial independence outside traditional systems. He used phrases like proprietary methodology and 12-month return projection. He handed out folders. He smiled at my father with the particular warmth of a man who understood that the person he most needed to impress was already sold. He asked for a show of hands from anyone interested in learning more. My father raised his hand first. 4 of his former colleagues raised theirs. My mother looked around the room like she was watching a garden come into bloom. I did not raise my hand. When Kevin finished and the room applauded, I stood up, not dramatically. I stood the way you stand when you have been sitting down for a long time, and you are simply ready to be upright. "Kevin," I said, "can I ask a couple of questions?" He was already reading the room's goodwill like a man who had just won something. He smiled at me with the benevolent patience of a person who assumes the skeptic can be talked around. "Of course, Leila. Aldridge Capital Solutions is registered as a Delaware LLC incorporated 8 weeks ago," I said. It has no broker-dealer registration with FINRA, no investment advisor registration with the SEC or the Texas State Securities Board, and no licensed financial professionals on staff. Soliciting investments under these conditions is a violation of the Texas Securities Act. The room changed temperature. Kevin's smile did not move, but the confidence behind it switched off like a light. "Those registrations are in process," he said, carefully. "The folders you handed out tonight describe projected annual returns of 31% and cite a proprietary algorithm," I continued. "That constitutes a securities offering." "You cannot make a securities offering without proper registration, Kevin. Not in a private dining room, not anywhere." Chloe was staring at me. My mother was staring at me. My father had gone very still in the way that men who have spent 30 years as engineers go still when they suddenly realize the load-bearing calculation was wrong. "Leila." My mother's voice had dropped into its lowest register. "This is not the time or The securities board has a word for what's happening in this room tonight," I said, keeping my eyes on Kevin. "They generally call it fraud." The doors at the back of the room opened. Two people walked in. A woman in a navy blazer and a man in a dark gray suit, both moving with the specific, deliberate calm of people who had done this before and were not in any hurry, because they knew exactly where everyone in the room was going to be standing. Kevin saw them. The folder in his hands dropped to the table. "Kevin James Aldridge." Sandra Okafor said, "My name is Sandra Okafor, Texas State Securities Board. I have a cease and desist order for Aldridge Capital Solutions, and we need to speak with you and anyone involved in tonight's solicitation." The room erupted. Not loudly. This was the River Oaks Country Club, and these were people who had spent decades learning to manage themselves in public, but in the specific contained way of 40 people, recalibrating everything they had just heard and felt in the past 30 minutes. My father stood up. "What is happening?" he said, not quite as a question. "Gerald." Grandma Ruth's voice came from the far end of the room. I had not seen her come in. She was sitting at a small two-person table near the window, in the silver jacket she wore to serious occasions, and she had clearly been there for some time. She rose slowly, and the room oriented itself around her without anyone deciding to do it. "Mother Ruth," my father said. "Did you know about this?" "I know a great many things, Gerald," she said. She walked to the center of the room. She did not rush. She had the gait of a woman who understood that the pace at which you cross a room communicates more than anything you say when you arrive at the other side. "I know that for 8 months you have been transferring money from your retirement savings to support Kevin's lifestyle, and that your wife helped him use your daughter's professional credentials to fraudulently strengthen a personal loan application. I know that tonight you raised your hand to invest in an unregistered securities offering run by a man who has never worked a single day in the industry he claims to represent." My father sat back down, slowly, like the air had been let out of him. "And I know," Grandma Ruth continued, "that your daughter Leila has worked night shifts and missed holidays and made herself as small and manageable as possible for over a decade, because she has been trying to earn a place in this family that she was already given the moment she was born." She paused. "By me, and by James." She looked at me. I nodded once. "James left his estate to Leila," Grandma Ruth said. She said it plainly, without ceremony, the way you say something that has been true for a long time and simply needed to be spoken. The full portfolio, the buildings, the trust, the accounts. "Franklin transferred the last of it into her name 3 weeks ago. Your father's life's work belongs to your daughter, the one you put near the service door tonight. S, 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 yes, S, 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 S. Chloe made a sound. My mother pressed both hands flat on the table in front of her. Kevin was being walked toward the hallway by Sandra Okafor's colleague, quiet now in the way that people get quiet when the architecture of their plan has collapsed and they are calculating what comes next. My mother looked at me. The management expression was completely gone. What was under it was something I had very rarely seen, something raw and furious and, beneath all of that, frightened. "You planned this," she said. "I prepared for it," I said. "There's a difference. You humiliated your father on his anniversary. You humiliated your sister." "Mom." I kept my voice even. "Kevin used my name on a fraudulent loan application. You helped him do it. That's not a family disagreement. That is a crime." I reached into my clutch and placed a business card on the table in front of her. "Franklin's office will be in contact this week regarding the $27,000 transferred to Kevin's accounts. They'll want documentation of the repayment arrangement." My mother looked at the card as if it might bite her. "You don't have to make it ugly," I said quietly. "You can repay the money. Kevin can cooperate with the securities board. And we can figure out the rest as a family." "That's still possible." I paused. "But it requires everyone in this room to stop treating my life as a resource to be managed." Grandma Ruth put her hand on my arm. The room stayed quiet. My father was looking at his hands. Chloe was looking at the window. Kevin had disappeared into the hallway. And my mother was staring at me with an expression I had spent 32 years trying to earn and had finally stopped needing. I am not going to tell you that what happened next was easy. It wasn't. My mother did not apologize that night, or that week, or in the weeks immediately following. My father called me 3 days later, and we had a conversation that lasted 2 hours and covered 32 years of history and ended without resolution and started the process of reaching one. Chloe and I sat across from each other at a diner in November and she cried. And I let her, and I did not minimize it. And we are still figuring out what we are to each other now that the architecture of who we were expected to be has been taken apart. Kevin cooperated with the securities board. The charges are pending. He and Chloe are no longer together. The amber necklace from my grandfather is on my collarbone right now, as I'm telling you this. His buildings are well managed and the portfolio has grown. Grandma Ruth came to my apartment for Thanksgiving, and we cooked together for the first time in years, and she told me stories about my grandfather that I had never heard, about how hard the early years were, and how patient money works, and how he always said that what you quietly build outlasts what you loudly claim. If your family has been treating your patience as permission, I want you to hear this clearly. It is not. You were not put here to be the soft place where everyone lands while they figure out how to take what's yours. Work your plan. Document everything. Know your worth, and I do mean know it specifically. In dollars and rights and legal standing, not just in feelings. And if the people at the table you grew up at can't see you clearly, put your energy into the people who can. Sometimes the wisest person in the family is the one who's been quietly watching from a 2-person table by the window, waiting for you to be ready. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to stand up to a family that kept underestimating you? I want to hear your story. Hit like if this one hit close to home, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Your patience is not a personality flaw, it is a strength that deserves to be directed toward people who actually see you. Leila spent years shrinking herself to keep the peace, and what set her free wasn't anger or revenge, it was simply deciding her own life was worth protecting. Whatever you've been quietly building, keep building it. The right people will recognize it. And the ones who don't, they'll figure it out eventually. A small note for you: this story was created and fictionalized by AI, crafted to entertain you while carrying a little something real worth holding on to.